Good morning. I know that we don't have speakers here, but I'm going to use the mic because we are taping today. My name is Jen Blevins. I'm the principal of the building. If I haven't met you yet, welcome. I'm so glad that you could join us this morning for a coffee chat with Dr. Bragan. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank the PTA who sponsors the coffee chat events for us at Woodrow Wilson. We always have such a nice turnout, and I think it's a nice time to talk and learn from one another about all topics education. Today, we're going to have a coffee chat with Dr. Bragan, learn a little bit more about the referendum and the overcrowding, or if you have any questions for him as well. I am going to introduce Ms. Natalie Lee, our PTA president, who's going to talk about a little bit about the upcoming events that are going on at Woodrow Wilson, so you can spread the word to your friends about some of the great things that we have here for parents.
Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, can everyone stand and do the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. So I'm going to keep this meeting really short because I wanted to devote all this time more to Dr. Bragan and his excellent presentation. So there's a couple of events happening right now. First of all, we have the 8th grade candy sale going on. That's for the school dance. So if any of there's 8th grade parents here, I believe you're familiar with the sheet that went home. So if you could just sell one box, if we get about 200 sold, we could actually have the dance for free. So just keep that in mind. And any money that's not spent on the dance is given to the PTA, which will continue on, like help fund any events that we have the upcoming school year. So a few events happening in March is we have a blood drive going on, which is from 3 to 8 on March 5th. That's actually in 2 days in the cafeteria. We also have the referendum. Please remember March 10th. If you haven't seen the signs up around town, they'll be up very soon. Also, we have our 8th grade Student of the Month breakfast coming up. It's going to be March 26th. I think we're having a coffee chat that same time too, right? That's correct. You have another coffee chat happening there. Is that the last one? That's the last one for the year. Okay, just keep that in mind. It's the last one for the year. Another event that's happening in April is Career Day. We still need volunteers to actually help out and present. So if you would like to come and volunteer and present your profession, Nita, who's in the back over there, feel free to reach out to her, and she's the one in charge for that event. We also have book fair coming up, another book fair in April, so we also need volunteers for that. So if you're interested, let me know, and I'll reach out to the person who's taking care of that event. And then the last event happening in May, we're having a Zumba fundraiser, so get all your leggings and come out and exercise on May 8th at 6 o'clock. And then I'm also having a couple of dine-outs. I don't have them yet, but I'm gonna get them set up and hopefully reach out to you. That's pretty much all. I'm going to keep it short. Now I want to introduce you, without further ado, Dr. Bragan and his presentation.
Awesome.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Pat, I don't think I need this, right? Turn it off? Or? Thanks. Well, welcome, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to meet and to go over a few things. Mrs. Blevins asked me if I wanted to show the video that we have about the overcrowding, and it's on our website. I'd rather not take this time and show that to you. It's about 11 minutes long. You may have seen it already. It's on our homepage, and if you haven't seen it, I would ask that you take an opportunity. Sure. If you take the opportunity to look at it at your leisure, because it does highlight some of the issues with the overcrowding. I don't think, for the most part, anybody questions that our schools are crowded. Some people have asked and had ideas about what we could do to mitigate the overcrowding that sometimes is different from what our expectation is. The overcrowding is real, right? It's happening, and it's happening most dynamically and most quickly at the high schools. And people would say, well, how can you be sure? How do you know? Well, we know because we know where those students are. They're here. And they're at the other middle schools. Our high schools are graduating classes from 12th grade in both high schools, approximately 1,125 students or so. And the incoming 8th grade class is 1,300. The 7th grade class is over 1,300. The 6th grade class is over 1,300, all the way down to 3rd grade. So those students are coming. That's where it's going to be most impactful, is at the high schools. The referendum is going to hit 6 schools. The largest additions that are planned are at the high schools, because that's where the greatest need is. And I'm not sure of any other solution. People have proposed different ideas and different things, and we've heard it. We heard it yesterday when we met with a number of parents at Woodbrook Elementary School. And the perfect solution would be a high school, a comprehensive high school that could accommodate 2,500 to 3,000 students. That would be ideal. In the middle of town somewhere, right? Somewhere maybe where the board office is in that area, or somewhere off of Talmadge Road where it meets New Durham. That would be great, but the land isn't there. For a high school, you need 50 acres to have fields, the space, the building. And in Edison right now, an acre of land is $1 million. So before you build anything, that's $50 million. And depending on the high school that you would build, and as I said, to really alleviate the overcrowding at both high schools coming, it would have to be significant. It couldn't be a small magnet school where you had 500 students. That wouldn't achieve the goal. You would need to have at least 2,000. Ideally, we would have a 3,000 student high school to accommodate the overcrowding in both high schools, which we could then adjust to alleviate some of the other overcrowding. But the high school that was built in New Brunswick recently was over $200 million. The one they're building in Perth Amboy is over $250 million. So people say, well, yeah, the ideal solution would cost over $300 million, and we don't have the space to do it. So we think what we're proposing is is the best of all options we have out there. And I've also heard, well, you're just doing this quickly to shove it down everybody's throat, to get 2 refusals, and then it's going to go to the state to get approved. That's not really accurate. For one, the state's not going to automatically approve it if it's 2 failed referendum. It's not going to happen, because the state would then have to be required to overrule what the populace voted on, and they're very reluctant to do that. There has to be a definitive need. And the 2 that have most recently had that done, where the state interceded and overturned 2 failed referendums, were where they could demonstrate the need for the community. Either it was an impoverished community, or the community didn't have the resources to be successful and the students weren't performing. Our students perform pretty well. At both high schools, when they leave those schools, they're well prepared. Their SAT scores, they do well. The students go on to institutions of higher learning. Most recently, we had a girl from Edison High School get accepted into West Point. You know, those are prestigious things. So we can't say that to the state, well, listen, if you don't give us this money, we can't provide the thorough and efficient education as we're required to by the state, because we are. The only thing that we could argue is that it's not safe, right? For safety and security reasons, we're too crowded. And that may not be sufficient for the state to overrule if we fail the referendum and to dedicate the $183.2 million. They may give some of the money to mitigate some of that overcrowding. So it's not we're just doing it really quickly to get it out there and put it back on it so we can have it fail again and go to the state. We're really hoping that it would pass this time. Those may or may not know I started on December 9th. The first referendum was December 10th, literally day 2 on the job. So it really wasn't my referendum or something that I worked hard on, because I was barely here. And it failed by about 1,000 votes. So we took a look at it, we tweaked it, we cut it down about $6 million, and we got rid of the things that weren't directly tied to overcrowding. They're still needed. Some of the things we got rid of were some of the fields and some of the parking lot spaces and things that ultimately over time we would address anyway, but they are not directly tied to making more classroom space for the students. So we came back out, and that's our plan. Trying to think what else I want to go over with you. One of the things that I don't know if everyone's aware of, but well, you know here because you can see it with the portables in the back there, right? The classrooms that were built, was that last year, I believe they were put up? Those are some of the things that the district's been doing over the last several years to help address the overcrowding. And for lack of a better word, I'd say that we're putting Band-Aids on things, right? It's not the ideal solution. They're portable trailers. They're somewhat permanent because they're going to be there for a period of time, but it's not the best solution. And the district's been spending anywhere between $4 and $10 million annually to do that. And if we don't pass a referendum, we're going to keep doing that because we don't have a choice. We're going to have to use whatever capital monies we have on it from the annual budget to address the overcrowding with some more portables, some additional classroom space like we also did at the Woodbrook Elementary School, the Menlo Park Elementary School, the FDR building. However, if the referendum passes on March 10th, that money that's allocated for that annual capital outlays can then be used to do different things. The first thing we want to dedicate that money to is securing the space to have full-day kindergarten. And if you watch the town hall video or some other things that people were asking, they're like, come on, how can you guarantee that? And I think I made a quote and said something, well, I can't guarantee the sun's going to come up tomorrow, right? But I'm counting on it. And I can't guarantee anything, but I can tell you this, that capital outlay that we've dedicated to mitigating the overcrowding on an annual basis, we will then use those funds primarily first year for securing the space for full-day kindergarten. Because right now our kindergarten population is about 850 students. And we know from what I said before, our average grade level is higher than that, 1,200 to 1,300 students. The reason is many parents don't want half-day kindergarten and they either go privately or they have to incur the expense of being in a half-day program and putting their children in a half-day YMCA program or whatever type of program that they have. So in order to have that space, we don't necessarily just have to double our kindergarten space, but we have to then add another quarter, right? Because we're going from 800 to somewhere between 1,200 and 1,300 students. We don't have the classrooms for that. So that's going to require us to get some additional space. We've talked about the Stelton Elementary School on Plainfield Road. That's an option to get that from the township, and it would need significant renovations inside. There's a few other buildings. One is on the Camp Kilmer complex that would need to be renovated as well. But we're also in contact with the Archdiocese of Metuchen to see if we can secure some space at St. Helena's or St. Matthew's, at least to rent that space for full-day kindergarten. So as a result of the passing of the referendum, the first thing we want to do is full-day kindergarten. With an anticipated, again, I'm not guaranteeing it because we have to get the space, but an anticipated start date of September of 2022. After that, again, with the budgeted capital outlays that we were typically using to address the overcrowding piecemeal, we would then look to do some of the other additions on the south side schools, some of the elementary schools that aren't as overcrowded as here, but to create those large group spaces like they have at the Woodbrook Elementary School, to have those nice gymnasiums, nice stages where they can have their productions and things like that within the schools. And that's the plan moving forward. But if the referendum isn't passed, we don't have those options. And we'll continue to do what we've been doing, is putting Band-Aids on a solution that really requires more of a comprehensive approach. So, you know, that's where we are. Questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I remember when I was teaching at Edison High School, we had a middle states accreditation come in, and I was on the committee to see how much open space was still available for building. This is in 1991. At that point, the town was 97% built out, which meant there was 3% available land if you could build on it or not. And to me, that's almost 30 years later, and we're still building. I don't know how we continue to find space to put houses up, but we're working with the town council, and that's one of the things that I've heard has not always been done in the past, but we have had a liaison committee meeting with the town council. I'm trying to go to all their meetings and make a connection with all the council members, and Council President Joyce Ship-Friedman, I've personally spoke with her on more than one occasion, to talk about working together moving forward, right? I understand their position. The more homes we get, the more residents we get, the more tax base they have. But at some point, the infrastructure can only hold so much. Whether that's the road down the road here, whether that's the road on 27 where Amazon is. I mean, I grew up on that part of town. It's amazing to me how crowded that is there. And it was crowded when I grew up. It's just even more so now. So I think we have to work in concert and be cognizant of that, because if they keep building, I don't know where we're going to put the students. That's a great question. When I go down to Truman Avenue, I don't know if you guys know that side of town there by the old Camp Kilmer, I'm amazed at all the construction that's still going on today and how quick those buildings are going up. Now, the projection for John Marshall School, which is in the referendum, was that they weren't going to significantly impact the enrollment. I don't believe that. I don't see how they couldn't. Most people come to Edison because of the schools, and it's a nice community, and they have families at some point. So We have to deal with that. I mean, as a school, we want to work with the town council on that, and they've been very receptive to having those conversations and how we could somehow limit that. Again, I'm amazed 30 years later we're still building. It's amazing to me. Good question, though. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, on a similar point, like as you said, they are building. So, for example, there is redevelopment on the Harding Road, right? Harding and Oak Tree. So the projection was there will be 2 kids in the school from those 8 townhouses. So I don't know how they came up with 2 kids in 8 houses. There will be like 16 kids from 8 houses, right?
And we're working on that with the town council to get more accurate projections, because I agree with you. I don't believe that, right? Unless you're,
Unless it's a senior community.
I was going to say, unless it's dedicated senior housing, 55 and over, I can't see how you could predict such a small amount of children in the homes, especially with our community. We have people that come here with families for the reason of going to the schools, which is great, but then we get to a point of a breaking point. I had a parent say yesterday, I pay a significant amount of taxes to live in Edison, which you do. And we came here for a reason. We came here because of the schools, the community, the climate. This is where we want to raise our children. And yet I walk in our schools, and you know, they're not as up to date as maybe some other towns. The reference was to North Brunswick. Maybe I should have moved there. It's hard for me to argue with that perspective. I want to say, no, stay here. Let it give us a chance to prove that it's worth your time, it's worth your investment with your greatest asset is your children, right? You're giving us your children for their academic careers. We want to make sure that they're well served. But that's a perception that's out there. And I think if we don't address some of the significant issues with the overcrowding in the schools, that's going to be more and more what people are saying. Well, why would I move here? Why would I send my children to school here if it's so overcrowded, if we're not getting what we need to get done? And you know, one of the things with the overcrowding that people don't realize is advanced placement courses. We try to offer as many of those as we can for a number of reasons. You know, I didn't find this out until my daughter, who's a junior in college now, was applying to schools. We went to visit MIT up in Massachusetts, and I found out that the average applicant there has 10 college courses under their belt, whether that's 10 AP courses or dual enrollment courses. At the time where my daughter went to high school, she was a junior then, she didn't have the opportunity to have 10 courses. So the reason I share that with you, in order to enable our students to still be competitive at the most elite institutions, we have to have that availability to have either dual enrollment or advanced placement courses. Right now, those courses are limited by space. If you have an advanced placement chemistry course, you're going to have your normal 5 periods a week of your course, but you're also going to have 2 or 3 labs. Now, scheduling, that's really difficult to do when you don't have the classroom space. So we are limited by the number of advanced placement courses that we can offer, especially the lab-based sciences, because of spacing. So what does that mean to you as the average consumer or the parent? It means your child may be excluded from those courses, and we have to set criteria that maybe is too high because you have to limit the number of students in those courses. I don't want to do that. We want to have schools that are inclusive and not exclusive, so that anyone that has the basic skills to be able to be successful, we want you to be in those courses. And we want to support you to take those courses. 1, it's better for the school, but 2, it's better for the children. The research is clear. Even if you don't get a 3 on the AP test, which we all want, right? We want to get credit, we want to pass the course and get the college credit. But just exposure to those courses is a predictor of greater success in college. So I want as many students as we can to take as many of those classes as possible. And the overcrowding does limit that to some degree. Other questions? Yes?
So once the referendum has been passed, how soon?
That's a great question. It's, you know, once it passes, how soon will construction begin? I can only speak to what, let me just take a little water. We passed a referendum when I was in Hazard. It wasn't as big because we weren't as large a school. But the night it passed, we had I think I mentioned this before, we had a celebratory cocktail or 2, and then right after that, we scheduled an appointment the next day with the architects to hit the ground running and start planning what we're going to do, because there is some logistics involved with that, right? The architects have to, while we fleshed out the plan now and what it's going to look like at school, they have to come up with the detailed plans. Then we have to go out to bid on each of those projects. 6 schools, $183.2 million is going to be a significant amount. It's going to be different builders. It's going to be different RFPs, and it's going to require us to be strategic in what we do and pick the right people and try to keep the timelines. I envision from the soup to nuts, it would start 2 to 4 years. I would hope to have something in 2 years up and running. One of the construction projects complete, obviously not all of them, but I'd like to get them all done by 4 years. And some of that requires active management on our part. I know from my past experience, when you're working with builders and vendors, sometimes they forget that they're working in schools. Like, our number one job is to protect our children. First and foremost is our number one priority. And that we have to make sure we mitigate the construction, those concerns while the construction is going on, because school is going to be going on as well. So 2 to 4 years is what would be my plan. Barring, weather, we had a great winter this year. This is a great winter for building, right? I remember in New Jersey when it used to snow. Seriously, I mean, this has been extremely mild. I think Mrs. Blevins said we're going to get snow tomorrow on Friday when all the spring sports start, right? That's usually the way it goes. But, some of that stuff is uncontrollable for us with the weather. So if we had, a few storms with a foot of snow each, that would slow it down too. But, yes?
One thing that might be good is the situation with JPC now, and how this is referendum going to bring that.
It's significant impact for JP Stevens, 33 classrooms alone, and renovate the auditorium and some of the large space areas as well. I was a vice principal at JP Stevens in 2004, 3, I forget when it was. And we had 2,200 students there then, and it was crowded then. We had 90 homerooms. We had English classes in the wood shops, and they have 400 more students there today than they had then. It is significantly overcrowded, and yet they do a really excellent job of managing that. Almost, it's astounding. If you have children at JP, you know what it's like trying to pull in and out of the driveway, right? Just in the morning. If you're not 20 minutes early, you're going to be waiting for 15 minutes on Grove Avenue. Yeah, I mean, at JMI, we had the same problem too. One road in, one road out. And some of the things related to the referendum are the parking and try to get people in and out more quickly. But also, one of the other things is to the hallways in the buildings, right? In this building, in every building, you can't really change the hallways. Because if I wanted to make the hallways significantly larger, I'd have to knock out that whole row of classrooms, which defeats the purpose, right? And then would have to add even more classrooms for the hallways. So it's 33 classrooms, there's science lab renovations and other things included directly on JP. But there also is corridor connections. If you go down to high school now, when you go into JP Stevens, you're going to go straight ahead. You're going to go to the gymnasium, auditoriums on the right. You go to the left, you go down the guidance suite. You got that kind of half circle as you go down to the cafeteria. And those we can't change. But on the back side, some of the other buildings, we could put more cross corridors to make it easier during the congestion times, because those are very busy. And I know they also stagger some of the dismissal between classes for the rooms that are farthest from the center of the building to try to, again, ease with the traffic, for lack of a better word, in the hallways. So those are some of the things we would do. But JP Stevens is it has the most amount of construction because it has the most amount of need, as does Edison High School as well. Great question, though. You got 2? No, I'm just kidding. No. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, as you said, the previous referendum was defeated by 1,000 votes. Right?
Correct.
I don't want to go into the why.
Okay.
What we can do now? I mean, we have only a few days remaining.
Yeah.
What we can do to make it?
Well, I think one of the things that, and again, I had some past experience with referendums and we were successful in my previous district. And what they did in the past, I can't go back in time and change it, but we can use that data moving forward. It was 3,600 and change voted no, 2,600 voted yes. So when we looked at the data, what we did was we broke it down by school. And I shared it with each of the building principals and said, listen, for this school, for us to pass a referendum, your voting block in this school, we need this many votes. And the principals have that information, and we shared it. And we said the way we get those votes out is to talk to our parents, like we're doing right now. We got billboards, we send home cards, we got flyers, we got the signs, and all that's great to get the message out for maybe those people that didn't hear it and don't know what's going on or when the referendum is. But that's not how you win. That's not how we pass the votes. The way we're going to win is like this: having a conversation, answering the questions that people have, providing as much information as we can, and then you share that with the people that you know. So when they come up to you and say, you know what, I know you've been at the PTO meeting, I know you're involved with the school, what are your thoughts? And just share your thoughts. If our parent population, a fraction of them, came out and supported this, it would pass overwhelmingly. We have 17,000 students almost in town. The last election had about 6,000 votes. We have 60,000 registered voters. You know, when we looked at the overlap between registered voters and parents in our district, it's 12,000. People were saying, well, a lot of our parents aren't registered voters. Some aren't, but not the majority. That's a misconception. We joke, that's what you say when you lose. A lot of people aren't registered. That's not really accurate. Because if you look at the numbers, our town has about 100,000 residents, 17,000 students, 60,000 registered voters, right? That's 77,000 people. So at the most, 23,000 could be non-resident or non-voters. That's still a significant amount of people. And our thought was if we have conversations with our parents and get their support, if they believe in it, that they then talk to other people. That's how we're going to get this passed. And I do believe that. We've had these small groups with a number of schools now, and we're continuing to do that with the PTOs. We had a really nice meeting with all the PTO presidents. That's kind of how these things came about. And we just shared the information. I don't know if that happened in the past, but I do know from my own past experience that the parent population is what will pass your referendum or not. And if the parents don't believe in it, they're not going to support it because they're the ones that are going to directly benefit from it. So that's our hope, and that's what we're trying to do. I appreciate that. Other questions? Yes, sir.
The past referendum, you're saying that you've shaved about $6 billion off. I guess these questions as last time. Why is, and it's going to make me sound selfish, but why is full day kindergarten part of that if it's already a cost-conscious referendum? Meaning if you're saying it's $1 million per acre just to get and you need at least 50 acres for a high school, why is full day kindergarten part of that referendum? Is that just
I think I hear what you're saying. It's really not directly tied to the referendum, right? What the referendum will do, it will free up the monies so that we can pursue that vehemently afterwards, that we're now spending. In our annual budget, which is about, last year's budget was around $262 million. Part of that budget on an annual expenditure for the last number of years, between 4 and 10 million, were spent on capital improvements, like the portables you have back here, the ones at FDR and so on. If the referendum passes, we won't need that capital outlay for that. But we will look at doing whatever we can to secure the spaces for full-day kindergarten. And in answer to your question, the reason is because we need it. And I happen to work in a district that switched from half-day kindergarten to full-day. And it was significant. And for me as the superintendent at the time, the change was more profound than I expected. One is, at that time, we had an early childhood learning center. We were a significantly smaller district where we had all the kindergarten and preschool students in one building. One thing I realized really quickly, when you're dealing with all 3 to 6-year-olds, that's a different level of leadership for the building. Just when kids order lunch, how to get on the bus. You know, when you only have a couple kindergarten classes in a larger school, it's easier to manage. When you have all 3 to 6-year-olds, it requires a different level of scrutiny and administration. We found that out pretty quickly. The other thing was that the academic gains were significant. You don't think, you're like, it's only 2.5 more hours a day. How different could it be? They were significant. As far as the students that were exiting kindergarten, going into first grade, their reading ability, their mathematical ability, their writing ability was significantly superior to half day, so much so that we then had to change the curriculum for first grade, which then meant the next year we had to change it for second grade. It went all the way up to middle school because it had that profound an effect. So I think in a progressive district like Edison, who has a history of excellence for its education, and they have for a long time since I went to school here, to not have full-day kindergarten is a disservice. I think our community deserves it. And so, and if you talk to most of the educators, and I can't speak for parents in the town, I think they believe in it too. Now, if my child went to a half-day kindergarten and I'm at Woodrow Wilson and I'm going to the high school, I will not directly benefit from that, typically, unless you had one of those surprise babies, right, that are 10 years apart, which happens. You know, I have a brother 10 years younger. I get that. It's not in your personal best interest, or you're not going to personally benefit, but it's going to benefit the community. And I've heard that discussion from people, too. I actually, Joyce Ship Freeman had a coffee at that new place on Stephenville Parkway, which had excellent coffee. BCL, I think it's called, just opened. Cost me $5 for a cup of coffee. I think that's a little too much, but and then they wanted a tip with that whole thing. I said, come on. Anyway, we were speaking to some citizens there that were, for lack of a better word, they were venerable, right? Older. And they were against anything that we were talking about. Like, I don't want to see my taxes go up at all. I don't want to see it. And I told them I thought that was short-sighted because when I was a youngster, you know, my grandparents lived in the community and they always voted yes for everything because they thought it was what they were supposed to do. My grandparents immigrated from Italy and from Ireland, and they were just happy to be in this country and the opportunities that it presented for them and their grandchildren. So that when an opportunity came to support education, they always did. And they weren't benefiting anymore. My mom and her brother were their children. My grandparents, they were out of school, but it would benefit us and the community that came after us. And I was trying to share that with them, that listen, I'm not going to tell you about your house values and all that because to me that's a benefit, and I get that. In New Jersey where we live, our communities determine the funding for our schools, right? So people move to communities based on their schools. And it may increase your house value if it's a better school. I wasn't selling it from that perspective, although it's valid. I was saying, we're part of a community. You're part of Edison Township, whether you're 80 or 8. And whatever we do to benefit the schools, it benefits everyone. And not about your house value, just about the human connection. And as people, we shouldn't be, again, this is my own 2 cents, it's the world according to Bernie Bregan. We shouldn't be so myopic and selfish that we just deal with ourselves. That I want to live in a place where I know that if I see a child in the middle of the street on the end of my block, I'm going to grab his hand and take him home to his mom or dad because they need help. That's a community that I want to live in, where we look out for each other. And that's what I was trying to tell these group of people. And I got about half of them to listen. The other half I understand too. If you are on a fixed income and your sole income is Social Security or a defined benefit pension that you don't have a lot to spare, I get that. 60 cents a day could be a lot for you. And I don't want to insult people by saying that it's not, because for some people it is. So all I said was do whatever you can as best you can. That was my 2 cents. Yes?
I recently visited my friend in San Diego, and their children go to like amazing schools, like their high schools, like with Olympic-sized swimming pool, all brand new. But I think in California they have a separate like education tax or something, so they pay the extra amount for schools. There's not something that I guess in New Jersey that that's more a state law, right? So.
True. I was happy to recently be out in San Diego too, and it's beautiful out there.
Yeah.
And they do have a separate, they have a vote annually, from what I understand. I do have some friends that are superintendents there as well. One friend in Arcadia Township, which is around the LA area. But anyway, and they have a separate vote every year, and if the community supports it, they can get additional monies for things like that. We don't have that in New Jersey specifically. And it's hard enough to get this referendum passed in this town for what we really need. But to go to the next level and to have like those extra things that really make a school stand out would be great. And one of the things the township is trying to do with the Board of Ed is create a foundation where people could donate those monies or put that money in there if they want to, and then that money could be used for things like a swimming pool or something like that. We're looking at doing any and all that.
Corporation donations.
Could do that too, absolutely. We have to set up a foundation first, and then those monies could be used to do things like that, because people are interested in doing that. Yeah, it's a great point. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The voting is in person or online?
It's no online voting anywhere. I think you could do the, if you had to have let them know already if you had a mail-in ballot, because I'm pretty sure they weren't home already. The mail-in ballots came out a couple days ago, I believe, right? So it would be mostly, if you didn't get the mail-in ballot already, it would be in person. And I do know that once you sign up for the mail-in ballots, you get them all the time, right, for every election. So I know I do that where I live because I'm usually working during voting hours, so it's convenient. But it would be in person at your normal voting precinct. 12 to 8 is the voting time. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, in regards to voting, if folks talk to the elementary school parents, I think they are truly the key because they truly will benefit from
Absolutely.
improvements. And then also, were a lot of these talks done later in the day because middle of the day is very inconvenient for a lot of
great question was whether did we talk to the elementary school students, parents, and did we do any of this at different times? And yes to both of those. Not only that, we reached out to the pediatricians in town and the preschools, and we got those lists of students that would be potential students in the future, because we don't have connections yet to that community, and we send home mailings to them as well. We also met in the evenings. Like I said, I'm meeting with the parents from James Monroe Elementary School tonight to go over, similar things that we talked about now. So we did, and we varied the times as well. And the town hall meeting was recorded, as I think this is being recorded, and that's on the website too, to provide that information. So if someone has a question, just direct them to the homepage on the website. Still a work in progress, it's getting better, but the information about the referendum is on the homepage as well. So yes, we did do that, and we're going to continue to do that up until the 10th. So, other questions? Yes?
Separate from the referendum, any thoughts on the virus outbreak and how the Board of Ed is
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. Did you say about the coronavirus outbreak? Is that what you said? That came up at every meeting in the last couple of days too. Obviously, that's on all of our minds. It's a pressing need. As a central office administrative team, we set up where we're going to meet every day to discuss different things we can do to be proactive and to be prepared. So we met yesterday as a central office team, and we talked about, we sent the letter home. I wanted to send it home at 3 o'clock. I think you got it at 7. I apologize. I should have went home earlier. Just on some of the things we're doing to be preventative. One of the things we continue to do is encourage our children and our staff to use good hygiene practices like we would normally do, washing our hands, and when you sneeze, using your elbow instead of covering with your hand. All those good practices we would do during any flu season. But it's scary what's going on out there. The information that I've received is, the coronavirus has a death rate of 2%, and people are like, well, that's not really that big. Well, the normal flu is 1 person in 1,000, which is 1/10 of 1%. So a 2% death rate is significant, and it's really frightening and it's scary. So one of the things we're doing, there's a couple, is we've just purchased, they're not here yet, but these sanitation machines that have like, for lack of a better word, it's like a fogger, and it goes into the classrooms. It takes 3 minutes. It takes about 10 minutes to do a classroom, and the students can come back in the classroom in 3 minutes, and everything's fine, and you won't be, nothing will be wrong if you touch the surfaces or anything like that. We have 2 of those coming. We ordered them. We changed our sanitation products that we use in the classroom to cover more of a broad spectrum of viruses that they will kill every day, wiping down the classrooms and the blackboards and things like that. We also talked about being proactive should there be an outbreak in our community where a school would need to be closed, how we could have a virtual session online, and making sure we have all the procedures with our staff as well as our students to do that. So we're taking it proactively and trying to be there in case something happens. I hope it doesn't. The latest data I heard this morning was in China, it's on the decline. It's kind of reached its maximum there and it's on the decline. So it wasn't a long duration, right? It came out about mid-January. So hopefully that would be the case here too. And as soon as we get to spring, the weather's better, more outside, less likelihood of spreading flu type things. But we're doing everything we can to try to be proactive. It's scary though. And I remember I was I think I might have been assistant soup. I don't know if I was superintendent when the H1N1, that known as the swine flu virus, came out. And that was similar. I don't think the death rate was as high, but it was as frightening for us at the time and how to be prepared should that happen in your schools. So, other questions? Yes?
I want to add to his question. I know you reached out to elementary schools. Have you reached out to like those daycares?
Yes,
Like,
and preschools.
Like YMCA and all those?
Mhm.
Okay.
That's who we want to target too, right? Because sometimes we're identifying those preschool age students that aren't yet for school. They're going to directly benefit from full day kindergarten as well. Absolutely. And just for those parents, just the cost basis of half day kindergarten, many parents come from two income households where mom and dad are both working, so they have to get care for the rest of the day. You know what that costs, right? Half day preschool for 5 days a week, you're looking at a significant amount of money on a monthly basis. And what we tell the parents, it's much more than the $215 average increase. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
In actually regards to preschool, frankly speaking, my main concern, and my kids will not benefit
a good point. If you build it, they will come, right? And if we have the full day kindergarten, we may get more students. We know we'll get more students because we get them in first grade, right? So it's a good point. I'm not sure how I could work around that, but if we know our kindergarten population right now is around 800 students, and our first grade is 1,200 to 1,300, that shows you right there, if you have full day kindergarten, you would get more students. That's one of the reasons we want to make sure we have the kindergarten space to accommodate. It looks like that number is fairly stable moving forward per grade level, is around 1,300. Unless all the other building comes in, then we'll see. I don't know. You know, it does go in cycles though, and it's funny that people talk about it because when I was a student here, we were over 15,000 students as an elementary school students. We had the Piscataway Town School on Woodbridge Avenue. We had the Clara Barton Elementary School I was talking to someone about earlier. We had the Oak Tree Elementary School on Oak Tree Road. We had all these other schools that were there that then the enrollment went down and they sold the buildings. For whatever reason, they were no longer being needed or used. But that population of school-age students does go up and down. So it's something we need to be cognizant of. And people say, well, you shouldn't have sold them back then. I was like, you know, I was 8 years old. You know, I had nothing to do with it. But in retrospect, they're right? If we would have kept those facilities, the Stelton School is a prime example. That was one of our schools. We could have kept it. Or the Oak Tree School, or the Clara Barton now, that's the seniors' home there. I'm sure it was significantly renovated for that. But those were structures that, as a district, we sold because they weren't used, and maybe we didn't have the foresight enough to see we may need these again. But most people don't, right? Especially boards of eds. Boards are elected for 3-year terms. People don't see the 10, 20-year projections typically. So.
Yeah, one last point.
Yes?
Is it possible, like let's say, I hope this goes through, but if it doesn't, it may go to state, and let's say state also doesn't approve it, what's going to happen?
It's a great question. What if it doesn't pass? Which we know it will, though, but just in case. You know, I'm a fighter. If it doesn't go through, we're not going to put our head in the sand and say, oh, well, you know, there's nothing we can do. There's always something we can do. We'll figure it out. I've said this before publicly, and I've said it to the town council. We're going to go back at it. We're going to take another bite at the apple. We will take another look at maybe tweaking it, seeing if we could adjust it or do something different or come up with a different plan. And we'll go back out in September. We don't have a choice. And people say, well, you know, if they already said no, well, I don't know what else to do. The students, it's not like they're coming. They're here. We know where they are. They're right down the hallway. Right? It's not like, well, they may happen in a couple years. And the Board of Education, to their credit, and the different boards over the last 12 years, they've tried to come up with things. They've come up with things that included a new elementary school. They've come up with huge projects. They've come up with projects that were smaller. We'll do it piecemeal. And none of them were successful. The only one that was successful was the one to rebuild James Monroe because it was a fire. It was tragic, and everybody felt terrible, and they agreed, hey, we need to rebuild this school. And in the end, all that money was paid back because they got all the money from the insurance, which they weren't sure they were going to get at the time, but they did. So we're going to keep going. We'll keep trying. I'm not a quitter. So we'll figure something out. We'll come back at. My concern is, though, as you may or may not know, the town council is talking about potential raises in taxes that may be higher than normal, right? I don't know all those politics behind there with the water company or whatever else is going on, but I do know this, that human nature being what it is, if I'm Bernie Bragan, I'm a taxpayer, whether the taxes are going up related to the town council or the school, I don't really care. They're going up, right? It's coming out of the same pot of money, and if they go up significantly, people are less apt to vote yes for a referendum in September or November. So in my mind, this is a one-shot deal to get it really, this is our best hope to get it passed is now, from what I believe. Well, thank you, everyone. This is great. I really appreciate the time. And if anyone has any questions or concerns, you could always call me, email me, and I'll be available. But thank you. Thank you, everybody.